Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. The Giants are hosting their mandatory minicamp this week, which means finally we've got some media coverage at the minicamp. For those who have asked in the past, neither Nick or I are going to be at these minicamps or anything. I actually, through CBS Sports, can get credentialed and have been credentialed through the Giants in the past. It's just not something that works within my schedule. I'm not a beat reporter, neither is Nick. We just are evaluators. Really, the basis of our coverage is based on the film, analytics, things of that nature. But I have a full-time job, and so does Nick, so we can't really afford to be there during the times when minicamp is. It's during the mornings, during the afternoons. I can't just step away from work for the day to do that, neither can Nick. So just a heads up, what we will be reporting on these minicamps will be stuff from the beat reporters, and we'll bring our own analysis to that based on what we've seen on tape or just based on our projection for these players. So that's what we have for you. And we're going to dive into some topics today from the minicamp. The good news is I think we have media coverage all week, so we might get some stuff all week here, Nick. But I wanted to start here with the big one for me, which is the fact that Daniel Jones is so ahead of schedule in his recovery from a torn ACL. So Daniel Jones has not started practicing yet from a full for full team drills, the 11-on-11. Still Drew Lock running with the first team. But the expectation is that, and I wasn't so sure of this, Nick, that he's going to be ready for the first day of training camp because he's well ahead of schedule. You can see him moving. You can see him cutting in some of these clips. He says that, according to Daniel, at least, he says, I feel so much more comfortable making those sharp cuts now than I did even earlier this spring. And his plan, according to him at least, and we don't know for sure if this is the case because of what the Giants, they have to obviously okay this, but he's like, I expect to be ready for the first day of training camp. Now, does that mean, Nick, that he's going to be ready to do once again these like 7-on-7s, things like that? Or does that mean he's going to be ready for the first team 11-on-11 drills? I'm not so sure yet, but I think it's obvious at this point that he's well ahead of schedule. And I think that really bodes well for the Giants' chances of maximizing this offense, because we also heard today from Brian Daboll that, look, point blank, based on his comments at least, and we'll get to that in a little bit, Daniel Jones is the starter here. This isn't a competition. This isn't an open competition between him and Drew Lock. Drew Lock is the backup, and Daniel Jones is the starter. And so I think to get him on the field as fast as possible is going to be the most important thing for the Giants to maximize this offense.
Have them develop that rapport with Malik Neighbors. Have them really get used to each other. It's good for the New York Giants right now if this is their option, right? They have a lot of money allocated in Daniel Jones. Now, there are a lot of other factors that come into this, right, that play into this. And the fact that Daniel Jones has that injury guarantee in his contract is something, but it looks like the Giants are going to roll with Daniel Jones. But I do think you should still take this week by week, because if we're in week 2 and Daniel Jones is not looking all that great, the Giants actually have a legit option that they can pivot to. I think we can realistically argue that they've had that at least in the last 2 seasons with Tyrod Taylor, but this year is a little bit different now that the Giants can realistically get out of this contract after this season.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when it gets to the actual regular season. I still think you're right, Nick. If things trend in the wrong direction, Daniel Jones won't be playing quarterback for this team. There's just no way to believe otherwise. I mean, there's at that point you're looking at, if I'm saying if it is a lost season, and we don't want to go down that path yet because things are looking exciting, at least on the offense side of the ball and on the defense side of the ball with some of the new talent they've added. But in that case, they'd be doing themselves a disservice to actually play him, because if he gets injured, they have to pay another $25 million against the cap or whatever it is to him versus, past situations, Derek Carr, they benched him, and Russell Wilson. Though I do think this benching would be earlier than those if the Giants are out of the playoffs. But we're not going to look at that. What we're going to look at is what Jones can bring to the table. And I'll say this about the Daniel Jones situation, Nick. One thing I'm sure of is that he still provides the highest ceiling for the Giants at quarterback over Drew Lock, a player who's been a little bit late in his career throwing the football, not as well versed, doesn't have as many reps, doesn't have the physical upside of Daniel Jones from an arm standpoint and from a rushing standpoint, and isn't the same stature in the pocket as Daniel Jones. Isn't as big of a quarterback, doesn't see over the line the same way. So we're looking at the max upside situation of Daniel Jones playing quarterback. And I like the fact that he's going to, he's far along enough in his recovery. Like there's not any kind of setbacks we've seen yet, right? Like even Kyler Murray last year, I feel like coming off the ACL was a little bit slower to kind of get into the practice, the 7-on-7s. And what Daboll said is, Daniel Jones is going to organize a workout with teammates somewhere between now and training camp. And that's important to me too. He's healthy enough to organize that. He said he did a little bit of that earlier this offseason with the incoming guys, but I want him to have some time with Malik Neighbors, before training camp starts. Throw some balls. I always mention this to you, Nick, but I love it. Like when Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow talked about why they're able to be so successful and have that historic last season at LSU is they threw 1,000 balls together the summer before that. And that's what I would love to see Daniel Jones doing, throwing hundreds of balls, not going to get to 1,000, but hundreds of balls, Malik Neighbors between now and training camp, so they can start to understand the timing of where Neighbors is going to be. Because if you're a quarterback like Daniel Jones or anyone, Nick, don't you think that there's a process, and I'm sure you agree with me, but I'm curious to get your take, where you need to understand the speed of the receiver? Like if you have a new player in, like you have to understand where he's going to be when he comes out of an in cut, when he comes out of an out cut, when he's running a post and things of that nature.
Yeah, of course. And throwing a lot of balls will certainly help that. And I'm glad that you're very excited about all of these balls. It's going to be great. And I hope that Wan'Dale Robinson also factors into this, man, because this is something that we haven't really discussed. We know Wan'Dale tore his ACL. So he had that whole recovery going from his first season to his second season, had a little bit of a later start to that. Now he has a full year healthy. And we know this practice, one of the biggest takeaways, not just Malik Neighbors, who we're going to talk about a lot, was also Wan'Dale Robinson. So if we look at, because you mentioned a little bit earlier, all of these new additions, Theo Johnson, Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy, also Wan'Dale Robinson going into his third year and 1 year removed from that torn ACL now that he is healthy, and Jalen Hyatt going into his second year. There's a lot of excitement with this 11 personnel package and this wide receiver room.
I'm with you on that, Nick. I think this Giants wide receiver room, we discussed this, a little bit earlier this offseason. We talked about it might be the fastest in the NFL from a pure speed standpoint. It's also one of the most explosive because Wan'Dale and Malik Neighbors are two of the most explosive receivers, I think, personally in the NFL. And you could see it with Neighbors. That's obvious. You just watch his LSU tape. But if you don't believe it with Wan'Dale, go ahead and watch some of the clips that Nick and I have put up on Twitter, or go back to our YouTube from last season. You could see some of our breakdowns, or just look at what the Giants posted today from this minicamp, the post-catch acceleration he had on that little quick slant he hit from Drew Lock. And I love that, Dan Duggan talked about how Drew Lock showed off a lot of different arm slots on his throws, a lot of sidearm stuff. Drew Lock has that in his cannon. He has that, 3-force release, which I personally love. There are times you need to not be just throwing over the top straight, that David Cutcliffe style, Eli Manning style quarterback. You need to have that different kind of ability to throw a different arm slot based on where the defender's hands are, based on where you are, based on where you need to get the football, right? Some of those short passes in the 1 to 5 yard range that, let's be quite frank, Daniel Jones has struggled with his career. That's when you need to have the different kind of arm slot for that. And that throw that he made to Wan'Dale felt like that was a great example. When you need that different arm slot, he throws that sidearm rip in there, gives Wan'Dale a chance to really have that space post catch. But the real story is Wan'Dale's ability to accelerate after the catch. It looked very, very different. It looked like a guy who was 1 year removed from the ACL.
It does. And I don't think we saw the break from the video that I saw. You kind of saw him catch it and then just accelerate away. And I was trying to give Cordell Flott a little bit of credit. I'm like, if they were actually hitting, could Cordell Flott have dove at Wan'Dale Robinson's lower half and made that tackle? I think it's at least plausible. But at the same time, I'm not really sure how that separation was created, and there is no tackling. All of the things that you brought up are true. Wan'Dale Robinson is very explosive. And if you get the football into that dude's hands, he can go, and he's going to have a lot more space to operate right now because Malik Neighbors' presence on this offense.
Yeah, and a few other things I wanted to note before we get into some other stuff. The Hard Knocks camera crew from NFL Films was at minicamp today, according to Art Stapleton. That series for Giants fans and us alike, Nick, will begin July 2nd. So we're less than a month before we get to see this cool Hard Knocks series. A lot of behind-the-scenes stuff they said from free agency, from the draft. I wonder what they'll include, what they won't include. But now we know they're going to include some content from this mini camp. So I guess we're going to get to see some cool clips. Like we will probably see that Wan'Dale Robinson play in its entirety and see the cut that he's able to make. In addition to a lot of these other plays that we've seen happen at camp. I know Theo Johnson had a touchdown today. Speaking of Theo Johnson, Nick, a little bit of an interesting situation with Daniel Bellinger, who's been working on the side. And according to Bellinger, he's not injured. It's on purpose he's working on the side so Theo Johnson can get more reps. And I think part of this has to do with the fact that Darren Waller has retired. We haven't recorded since, but Waller officially retired from the NFL, will not be on the New York Giants. Before maybe, let's get into your thoughts, one on the retirement from Waller and what that means, and then two on, Theo Johnson getting all these reps and maybe by plan and by design, Bellinger being on the side.
It's not surprised. Darren Waller's heart wasn't fully in football, so he shouldn't play football. He has a lot of other things going on right now, and I wish him the best, but he's retired. We could turn the page. Giants can take that $11 million that they're going to get immediately and add it to their cap. They still don't have that much cap space. I think it's slightly more than $12 million. But Theo Johnson now really needs to get up to speed. He's a rookie. We always have talked about rookie tight ends typically don't transition into the league and hit the ground running. There's typically a little bit of a transition period there. So with Theo Johnson, I think Daniel Bellinger, it's safe to say, look, he has played enough football to where he is comfortable in this offense. He started in this offense. He knows this offense. We want a really talented 12 personnel package that consists of Daniel Bellinger and Theo Johnson. It's best that Theo Johnson takes these reps and gets as much experience in this offense as possible.
Do you ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE.
I completely agree with you. And I think a point you made that was really important there was Bellinger's experience within this offense. If you look at even just his rookie season and what they put on his plate as a rookie 2 years back, he had one of the 5 highest snap shares among all tight ends in the NFL. Like, they threw him right into the fire, and he was playing an incredible amount of reps. From a mental standpoint, he's up to speed, both as a blocker and a receiver and a route runner from that standpoint. So I don't really know if he necessarily needs these reps in the spring. Obviously, when we get to training camp, we're going to see Bellinger on the field a lot with the first team offense, because as much as they're getting Theo Johnson up to speed, he's still a rookie, and it's not going to be that easy for him to just come on the field and start to split snaps or anything like that with Bellinger. So I think they're saving Bellinger up for training camp, where he's going to be worked a lot, because he's going to be on the field probably every rep with first team offense, just based on the depth chart now that Darren Waller has retired. And I'm still really excited about Bellinger year 3, because I still think there's a lot of meat left on the bone from a receiver standpoint. I know he's going to be going back to tight end U, something he's done 2 years in a row. That's a really, priceless experience for him, I'm sure, where he gets to work and hone on his craft and work with some of the best tight ends in the NFL and the best tight ends of all time. Because I know a lot of the retired tight ends go back and help teach and coach during that experience. So I still have high expectations there, and I'm okay with Theo getting these reps, because guess what? Like, Giants are going to need Theo a lot sooner than they expected. They probably expected to draft him round 4, toolsy prospect. They can develop him, take their time with him. It's just not the case anymore with Darren Waller retiring. There are reps that need to be had. We know the Giants with Daniel Jones at quarterback are going to run a lot of 12 personnel. They're not just going to be as exciting as it is on paper to get Wan'Dale, Hyatt, and Neighbors on the field all at once. They don't have the offensive line really to afford that at all times. And let's be frank, and I hate to say this because I know some fans I don't hate to say this. I don't understand why fans get disappointed by this when they've seen this for 5 years. But Daniel Jones hasn't been the quarterback who can just drop back in 11 personnel and scan a field and rip it. So they need some type of smoke and mirror stuff with 12 personnel, play action, bootleg stuff with Jones to kind of hide some of that stuff. So I don't necessarily think that Theo Johnson's going to have a redshirt year.
I don't think he'll have a redshirt year. And I wouldn't even say it's just because of smoke and mirrors. It's also just the chess match of football, going up against defensive coordinators, getting them to commit to certain personnel packages that you can exploit. And the fact that you have a seam stretcher. Now, he's not Darren Waller, but someone who could stretch the seam, who was a very good athlete. I think you can use him offline a little bit. You know, you could use him as a big slot. You can do a lot of different creative things with that skill set. And you can put them both in line, do double Y sets with Daniel Bellinger, with Theo Johnson. And you have two guys who theoretically should be above average blockers in the NFL.
For sure. And I definitely think it's a matchup game, but I would like to see the Giants with this type of explosive talent at wide receiver upgrade to a little bit more of what we saw at the end of 2022, which is more spread, more pass first. And Jones is going to have to step up and play his best football within that. So, and hopefully he can. And you know, if he has this full training camp instead of starting out slow, which we expected he might, there's a good chance he will have that breakout, hopefully, at least with Neighbors in the mix. A couple other things to touch on here. I mentioned earlier, Nick, the confirmation that Locke is not competing for the starting job. He's not going to have that open competition. He's going to be a straight backup. Daboll said Drew Lock has done well and progressed, and reiterated this good experience to play with the guys that he's not going to rep with, or he might not rep with, he said, once training camp starts. So that was a really good confirmation, at least on my end, that, you know, it's likely not going to be a competition there at quarterback. Jones will be the starter. And in addition to that, we saw Jones and Daboll kind of having some fun, Nick, and doing some like rock, paper, scissors, shoot, stuff like that. I remember before the draft some reporting from some sources, one source that, you know, inside the Giants organization, it was Brian Daboll making the case for Daniel Jones and Joe Shane ready to move on to another quarterback. And, you know, taking that with a grain of salt, because none of this is confirmed. No one's inside. I always say, unless you're inside that building, in that war room, I don't really, I'm not going to fully believe it. But when stuff like this happens, you know, it just starts to add to the mix of, you know, what's the situation here. And I do believe there's a chance that Brian Daboll really does believe that Daniel Jones is his quarterback of the future, if he can just do a few things right for him, right? If he can just get him to a certain point from a mental standpoint, which he's ready to give him another opportunity for because of how bad the offensive line situation was last season.
Yeah, it was a terrible offensive line situation. The guy got hurt.
Like we mentioned earlier, Nick, their best option on the roster at the quarterback position from an upside standpoint. A few other things to note from today's practice that I wanted to get into with you. The first was Drew Phillips, the Giants rookie third-round pick, had an interception in today's practice, which I found notable just because of the, you know, the narrative from the pre-draft experience that he never had an interception at the collegiate level. So
yeah, it was a tipped pass, though. Not to take anything away from Drew Phillips, but it went off a UDFA wide receiver's hands, popped up in the air. Right,
there was a little bit of luck involved, but you know what? That's part of what interceptions are. There's variance. There's luck involved. Like, I think part of the reason he didn't get any interceptions at college, not to say he's great ball skills, but it's because of luck. So now, good to see some luck on his way. Maybe that will hopefully carry over to the regular season. Right now, he's not working with the first team or anything like that. They've actually had an interesting mix today. I don't know if you saw the cornerback mix, Nick, but Cordell Flott seems to continue to get those first team reps opposite Deontay Banks. They're really going to give him a shot with this defense to win that outside job. But actually, our boy here, Nick McLeod, who we've really liked the film of, one of our more underrated players based on the tape over the last couple of years, slot reps for him. So he's actually getting some work in the slot, which I don't know if that was necessarily the case in the past. And I'm curious to see how he steps in that role.
Yeah, same here. I mean, he's played the slot. They tried him out at safety at one point. He's a versatile player, man. He's a versatile player. I think his primary role on this roster is as a special teamer, but I would explore using him on defense, because every time they put him out there, in Wink's defense at least, he had some success. Even when he first came over to the New York Giants against the Green Bay Packers in, what was that, week 5 or week 6 of the 2022 season, he had some success, came away with a really big PBU. I've always been a fan of Nick McLeod. And also Caleb Hayes, who is like I think he has 1 year under his belt, had 2 PBUs in practice. One of them was, I think, a flat route. This is according to Paul Dottino and John Schmelk. It was a flat route, and he read it really well, showed a lot of discipline, broke right when he needed to, and got his hand on it. The other one was a deep post route where he got it at the last second. I think both throws were from Nathan Rourke. But either way, this is a player who we don't really discuss all that often. We don't know that much about, but we do know that the Giants, they have some probably possible spots, I would say, at cornerback. So with a really good mini camp, and he could carry that into training camp, get that drumbeat going, maybe he can make the roster and be one of those guys who we see play on Sunday at some point.
You're right, Nick, because this is the position where that could very well happen at. This is the position corner where we might see somebody come out of the, I don't want to say proverbial blue, but just out of nowhere to kind of play a big role this season. Because yes, Cordell Flott's getting those reps now, but we've also seen some clips where Cordell Flott has struggled in coverage this OTA season this spring. And that was something that, on the outside, at least he struggled with at times on tape last year. Now, I don't think all the situations were perfect for him, and maybe this defense will fit him better, but I don't think he's a lock either to have that role locked down. So they're going to be trying a lot of different players out. And last year we saw Trey Hawkins rise to kind of the praise of Wink Martindale, I'll say, or just the fact that, look, he played well enough in camp that he got a big role early in the season. It didn't pan out. Hawkins wasn't able to kind of maintain that role. Got obviously the Tyreek Hill play, which I still don't think was his fault, because Wink Martindale's putting press man with no outside help against Tyreek Hill for Trey Hawkins is an insane task to do, to have to do. But, we might see someone kind of play that role, that Trey Hawkins late breakout role in camp. And I'm got to keep an eye on all these players who are mentioned here. Let's get to some lesser news, some not so great news. Evan Neal's not practicing again. Brian Daboll said Evan Neal won't participate in any of the mini camp. They've quote unquote backed off Neal, who underwent ankle surgery in early January. And we haven't seen Neal take any team reps this spring. It's unclear if he suffered a setback to prompt the backing off during these position drills, but right now there's no Evan Neal, which means Josh Azudu has been taking these first team reps at right tackle.
Now, could this work out in the Giants' favor if Josh Azudu ends up developing, getting the necessary reps that he really need to anchor himself down at right tackle? Maybe that's a silver lining here, right? Like maybe that is something that we could take away and it be positive, because Daboll also said he expects everybody to be available during training camp. So that includes Evan Neal, that includes Daniel Jones, that includes Aaron Robinson. And I don't know if I'm missing any of the other guys, but all those guys should be available, according to Brian Daboll, by training camp. We're hoping Evan Neal can be available. But if there is a silver lining, it's Josh Azudu getting some reps at right tackle.
And that's good news on the Gunnar Olszewski front, too, as well, because
yes.
We thought that, I at least thought that might have been a short to long-term injury that he suffered. So apparently he'll be back, which is good for the special teams, Giants specials. Obviously, look, the Giants had a punt return touchdown last year once he was added to the roster. I don't remember the last time that happened before that. I can't even remember.
Wayne Harris, I think it was, baby.
Yeah, against the Saints, I think, that game. And that was so long ago. That was like Eli Manning was still in like the back end of his prime. So, good to have something like that on the roster for sure. Malik Neighbors thinks he made a good first impression this spring. I think he's right about that, Nick, just based on all the hype and all the video. He says, I bring the dog, I bring the juice. He said the key for me this spring has been he wanted to show the guys that he wants to practice and he wants to put the work in. And I think that's really important, Nick, because I think there's been a lot of failed first round, second round picks at wide receiver who had all the talent in the world, but didn't have that dog mentality that, I'll bring it to practice too. I'm not just going to bring it to the game. I'm going to bring it to the practice. We're talking about practice, not a game, practice. And yeah, Malik Neighbors is in it for practice.
In it for practice. And it was funny. He had a cool exchange with the media where somebody asked him, hey, Malik, did you get both your feet in bounds on a catch that he made near the sidelines? And he's like, I always get my feet in bounds, of course.
Yeah.
Based on I love that confidence, man. And based on the tape, he's not really wrong.
Exactly. He's got great spatial awareness around the sideline. There's really not any negative to his game, in my opinion, from the tape evaluation, except for release package off the line of scrimmage. That's not even a negative. It's just he's young, he's raw, and that's something he's going to obviously be able to improve and work on. And even if he's not, there's been plenty of wide receivers with his athletic gifts who have won without a diverse release package off the line of scrimmage. Like I'm thinking of like Antonio Brown, for example.
Look, there are only a certain amount of wide receivers who have top 5 potential. Obviously, it only ends up being like top 5. So 5 players end up earning that, and it's very subjective. But Malik Neighbors at least has that. When is the last time the New York Giants had a wide receiver like that? It was Odell Beckham Jr. And then before that, what? Hakeem Nicks? You could say he had top 5 potential.
I love Nicks, but no.
No, I know, but maybe he had the potential to be a top 5 wide receiver. I think you can argue that he had the potential, but he was never a top 5 wide receiver in the league, if that makes sense. But my point is the Giants have like a true dude right now who in 2 years we could be like, yo, Tyreek Hill, Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. And that, again, not to be redundant, should get us so damn excited.
Yeah, it does. And I'm not trying to discredit Nix. He was unbelievable before the
Yeah, no.
injury, but his rapport with Eli Manning played a huge role too. Those back shoulder fades, those are something that any of these top receivers I think can develop if they have the right situation with the quarterback. But Nix won with his hands, with his explosiveness. I kind of feel like Malik Neighbors is just a better version of Hakeem Nicks, a faster, more explosive version of Hakeem Nicks in a lot of ways.
Certainly faster, certainly more explosive.
Yeah, and not much smaller either. Nix was not the biggest guy. So I think Nix was a great player, but I think Neighbors is just a different level prospect.
Of course.
Yeah, for
Nix
sure.
also had, I think, just massive hands. Whereas Malik Neighbors has big hands, but like we always talk about Odell Beckham Jr.'s hands, and OBJ had huge hands, but like Nix's hands were just freaking gigantic.
Yeah, he won with hands. Odell Beckham Jr., and he's discussed this a lot, and it was a big factor. I hope Neighbors listen, but he really worked on grip strength. That was a big factor in Odell Beckham's game, more so even than hand size, and you could obviously see it in his ability to catch a football. I would say the last one before Beckham for me was Plax, just because Plax was such a big size that he had the potential to be just the most dominant receiver, and we saw it against the Packers in that championship game against Al Harris, where they literally just had him isolated against Harris because the Giants had such a good run game back then. They're just running like heavy personnel packages and ripping balls, and Eli was just ripping balls in that cold wind to Plax. And that was when Eli used to just fire it in with velocity and throw such a high, tall ball. And it was a lot, not even the best, like most ball placement throws, but it didn't matter because Plax was so big. But anyway, back to what we're discussing here. The Neighbors thing, really excited about him. I don't think you can't not be at this point. Bobby Okereke talked a little bit about the new defense. He said it's fun for him because he gets to play more coverage, and he thinks that this defense is going to have a good mix of everything. He thinks one thing to keep an eye on is that they're going to be very aggressive in stopping the run.
I love that. I mean, you need to fit the run when you are probably going to play more of those split field coverages. So Bobby Okereke, I'm sure he's going to learn that, and he's going to adapt to whatever Shane Bowen throws at him, and he's going to set the example for the other linebackers. Isaiah Simmons, if he factors into this, Micah McFadden, Darius Muasau, he'll set the example, Bobby Okereke, that is, for those guys to emulate.
Couple other things, I'm with you on that. Quietly, I feel like Tommy DeVito's had a really nice spring. Look, I don't know what to make of him long term for the Giants, though. It's hard to say that there's nothing on the bone there, because he did win 3 games and made some really good tight window throws, to be completely honest, and does throw from different arm slots with velocity at times. You saw it on the touchdown pass to Hyatt. That was a good throw by him, outside his frame, away from the coverage, which is pretty sticky, giving his receiver a chance to make a play on the football. He had 2 more touchdowns today that I saw, one to Bryce Ford-Wheaton, who's also had a really nice spring and could be a sleeper to make the roster. The Giants liked him enough to bring him back after the ACL. He's got nice size speed combination, but also one to Theo Johnson, where Johnson looked pretty open on that one, but still touchdown throw there. So Tommy DeVito, man, I think after the Giants were unable to trade up for Drake May and didn't deem McCarthy or Penix or any of those guys left to be worthy of the 6th pick, at least not over a player like Malik Neighbors, it pretty much guaranteed that DeVito's going to have one more shot here. And I don't hate it, Nick, because again, like I said, there is at least some level of game film from last year where he had some really impressive moments, specifically throwing those hole shots, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And he surprised a lot of us, won those 3 games, took us out of the Drake May. So he basically winning those 3 games ensured that the Giants wouldn't get Drake May, giving him more opportunity to stay at home with his parents and eat chicken cutlets. It really is just
football at the NFL level. It's crazy. He won himself a job, essentially.
Yeah, and you have to respect that. You have to respect that grind. Good job, my fellow Paisan. But you're right, man. He's having pretty damn good training camp, or not training camp, a mini camp and OTAs so far from everything I've heard from the beats. And another thing, Bryce Ford-Wheaton did end up leaving practice after he had that diving catch because he hurt, I believe it was his right arm or shoulder. Darius Slayton also left practice. I'm a little bit unclear on what the hell happened there. And the other
defender, I
think he collided with the defender, and then Chase Cota, who was a UDFA out of Oregon wide receiver, ended up leaving as well with, I think, an arm or a shoulder injury.
Okay, so we got some injuries.
Some injuries. Don't know how serious it is. Hopefully Darius Slayton is okay, because that is a dude who's going to earn snaps if he's healthy.
And you mentioned earlier that Daboll said everyone's expected to be ready for camp, but this was before practice, so before any of these injuries. So hopefully nothing on that front. Obviously, that would be not the way we want to start this bad boy off. But one more thing on DeVito. I felt like as he played more, Nick, he had the timing was better. I'm thinking about that game. I call it a game-winning throw he made to Wan'Dale Robinson against the Packers. That ball was released pretty early. He got that ball out on time, ripped it on that out cut by Robinson. It was a great route by Robinson as well. He just burned his slot defender. But that's just the type of thing. Like, if he continued to get reps, we might see a different version of him as well. I don't necessarily have like the most long-term expectations for him or anything like that to be like their starter. But, if he can develop into a QB2 for them long-term, that's a win. It's a big win for the Giants. So I'm still hoping that they can develop him. We mentioned earlier Zudu getting those reps at right tackle with the first team. One thing I didn't mention was Darnay Holmes is getting some outside corner reps. This is another new thing that we're seeing within this defense and within this new system. Any thoughts on Holmes' chances of making any kind of impact as an outside corner?
Let's not forget, Darnay Holmes was a pretty damn talented outside cornerback at UCLA. Now, that's the college level. The issue with Darnay Holmes out there is he's going to be going up against ex-wide receivers sometimes, bigger wide receivers, and he has like 28-inch arms. He's just not a big guy. He's like 5'9". He's very thick, densely built. I love him in run support, but I think that lack of length will get in the way. But right now, the Giants don't have a clear cornerback too, so you might as well give Darnay Holmes a shot to at least seize that opportunity. So I'm definitely okay with it.
Speaking of the uncertainty at the cornerback position with the Giants, Trey Herndon, a veteran player, 20 years old, spent 6 years with Jacksonville, had 25 PBUs, 3 interceptions during that time, has been mostly a slot guy, but has played over 1,500 snaps outside. So he obviously has the potential to play inside, outside. Got himself a workout with the Giants today. I think there's a good chance that, he has a shot to make this roster. They have extra cap space now with the Darren Waller retiring. I don't know what's going to happen yet with that cap space. I have some speculation that it might go to corner. They might try to do a couple things with it. Corner, defensive tackle. Those are areas where I think they can really look to invest in and shore up just areas that need it on the defensive side of the ball, I would say. Just need depth. But I'm definitely interested by this Trey Herndon workout.
Yeah, they'll probably sit on the cap space, but that doesn't mean they won't spend it on smaller contracts like a Trey Herndon, for instance, right? Because Trey Herndon's not going to command $9 million annually like a Stephon Gilmore may.
Yep, you're right about that. One thing to touch on before we get out of here as well, Nick, that I wanted to touch on, a couple things actually that we missed. One, Azeez Ojulari, no team reps today. I think they're managing him, and which, honestly, this is probably a good plan at this point for Azeez Ojulari. Let's just manage him throughout minicamp, throughout the spring, throughout training camp, throughout the preseason especially. Let's not take any risks there. Manage those reps, then get him on the field in the regular season, fully healthy for once, hopefully, in a role that he can play, that reserve role where he's just coming in on passing downs.
We've spoken about this the last 2 years. Azeez Ojulari has suffered some sort of injury that lingered throughout the season. Now we don't have to rely on him as a starter. Let's just have him be a closer and have him work into these sub packages on obvious passing down that allow him to use his unique flexibility, explosiveness, and speed to threaten tackles. He's not going to see a lot of help, right? That's all going to be going to Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon.
Exactly. That's exactly right. All right, one final thing to talk about here, Nick. I saw this in your notes. The kickoff return pairs. We know the kickoff rules, the new changing kicker rules, are going to make kickoff returns a big part of the NFL game again. Some coaches, I know Mike McDaniel discussed this, I think a week ago, the Dolphins head coach said he thinks it's going to be a much bigger deal than people realize right now. And he says that every star skill position player is going to be begging the coaches to put them on kick returns by the end of the year. Who knows that's going to happen? Time will tell, but right now the Giants have been really putting a lot of resources into testing things out in this regard. They've had some kickoff return pairs, Devin Singletary and Dante Miller. Remember, Miller ran a 4.27, really sleeper running back for the Giants, Dante Miller. Tyrone Tracy, the rookie, and Ayer Asante, the undrafted UDFA. Dante Miller has gotten a chance with Wan'Dale Robinson, and then Singletary and Asante. So they've really mixed a lot of these players with Miller and Singletary getting the most reps.
Yeah, I think we should start talking about Miller a little bit more. Like Dante Miller, this guy has elite speed. He went to Columbia and then spent his final year, which I believe was the 2022 season, at South Carolina. And when you have this type of elite speed and you don't really have a lot of running back depth, if you have one injury, a guy like Deshaun Corbin or Dante Miller could easily slide into that spot, especially if he can prove himself worthy as a kick returner. So Dante Miller is a name to definitely write down and keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I think he could be surprising. Like, he could be the guy that, there's always that like training camp breakout, Nick, where it's like a lot of hype around the player, a lot of explosive plays because of the nature of training camp without the pads, without the hitting. That could be the guy. If you run a 4.27, you could be that guy.
Absolutely. And there are a couple other noteworthy notes here. Matt
Okay.
Nelson, the offensive lineman, he's also recovering from ankle surgery. I think he worked with the third team. Now, the third team is not anything to write home about, but Matt Nelson has some solid NFL tape, and we know that Evan Neal is also coming back from this ankle injury. Maybe by training camp, Matt Nelson could be that outside shot to compete for the swing tackle spot with Josh Ezeudu if Josh Ezeudu doesn't assimilate to the tackle position as the Giants hope.
Yep. Agreed with you on that. Anything else I missed, Nick?
Yeah. Another veteran workout was offensive tackle out of Arizona State from, I believe, the 2022 draft, Kellen Diesch. He's like a 6'8" tackle who is uber athletic, but didn't really have the play strength. I remember studying him. He was one of the first offensive linemen I studied in 2022. I think I had a day 3 grade on him, and hasn't really stuck anywhere. Very, very nimble feet, very quickly gets into his pass sets. And you could tell he is a balanced and coordinated athlete when he is on the move, but you can be a balanced and coordinated athlete on the move. If you can't anchor down against strength, you're probably not going to see the football field. Still, I think it's worth noting the Giants worked him out because he has unique traits and he's massive.
Yeah. Anytime they work out an offensive lineman, I think it's worth noting. Giants still looking to develop some. When are we going to get our Jordan Mailata of the franchise?
Let's calm down. We gotta start scouting in other continents. That's what we need.
Yeah. Well, Ozzy Muir is supposed to help us with that. But anyway, that's all we have for today on the minicamp, Giants' first minicamp practice. There's going to be more minicamp this week, so we'll probably do some shows on those as well. Hopefully some more highlights, some more film to break down, some takeaways. But if you haven't seen it yet, check out that Wan'Dale Robinson play because it's fun to watch his post-catch explosion. It's back, and it's definitely going to be a different level than we saw in last season in 2023 as he was kind of still recovering from that ACL. Thanks again for tuning into Big Blue Banter. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.